Hey guys, Pete here, and today on the 11 Yanks Breakdown Show, we have a very special guest, Paul Tenorio of The Athletic, of the Total Allocation Disorder Podcast, which I've plugged on the show before, is here to talk to us about the Soccer United Marketing US Soccer breakup. As you guys might have remembered, before the international break, US Soccer announced that they would no longer be partnering with Soccer United Marketing after the Qatar World Cup. Paul Tenorio has a lot of contacts within the league and within the federation and a wealth of knowledge about this topic, and he came on the show to talk to me about the implications for US Soccer, for the men's national team, for Soccer United Marketing, and even for MLS. Quick disclaimer though, on the day, my internet was a little bit wonky, so there are moments when Paul is talking and it's a little bit glitchy. I apologize in advance for that. Definitely not Paul's fault, it was mine. And of course, when it rains, it pours. For some reason, my mic was not working on the day, so the sound quality of my audio isn't great. Thankfully, Paul does 90% of the talking, so hopefully it's not a problem. It was a great interview overall, and I feel like I learned a lot. Thanks a ton to Paul for coming on. You guys enjoy the show. Hey guys, what's up? Pete here with another episode of 11 Yanks, and I'm very, very excited today. We have Paul Tenorio from The Athletic, from the Allocation Disorder Podcast, which I've plugged on the show before. He's going to come here to talk today to us about the whole USSF-SUM split that's recently been announced. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Paul, I know you have to run a little bit here. You have to go pick up your daughter from school. I appreciate you coming to talk to us today. Are you good if we just dive in?
Yeah, let's jump right into it.
Okay, so I don't know who broke it. I saw it broken from your Twitter account that USSF had basically announced its split from SUM after 2022. Could you talk to us a little bit about your background or the background of the SUM, the founding of SUM and its relationship with USSF and MLS over the last few years and what its purpose was?
Yeah, sure. Essentially SUM was founded because back ahead of the 2006 World Cup, there was a lot of excitement around the national team, which is kind of funny, right? Because you're coming off of the 2002 success of the World Cup. Major League Soccer was in a very different place at that point in time. You got to remember that as well. And essentially what happened was IMG owned the rights to US Soccer, the commercial rights, and they were losing money on it. They were looking to get out of that contract. And so Major League Soccer and its owners decided to create a company, which it named Soccer United Marketing, and that company would be essentially the commercial arm of MLS. And it would get into the commercial rights of the game. And they looked at it's a great opportunity to buy into Major League Soccer, to buy into US Soccer, take over that account from IMG and start to sell the US national team and its commercial properties, right? That's a media deal, eventually was the media deal. And it's what they looked at it as, obviously if IMG was losing money on it, they didn't necessarily look at it as something that was going to pull a profit in for Major League Soccer right off the bat. But, they have interests in the growth of the sport commercially in the United States. Major League Soccer has a massive interest in that, right? They are the professional sports league, soccer league in the US. And so they believed if they could take over these commercial rights for US Soccer and grow them, that yes, they could turn a profit eventually. You probably believe that if you're going to go buy that contract, but certainly they believed that they were going to invest in the growth of US Soccer, that would basically lift the property of Major League Soccer as well. The more popular you make soccer, the more popular you make the league. And the best entry point into soccer at that time was the U.S. men's national team.
Right. And probably still is to this day. Is that fair?
And I should say U.S. women's national team. And I think that property, coming off of the 99ers was an incredibly important property, still is, and probably is the more important of the two when we talk about the media deal today. The U.S. women's national team domestically, I think on the media side, the TV side, is probably far more, I think probably far more valuable in the TV package U.S. Soccer is going to be selling now that they've broken off on their own because of what U.S. Soccer has to sell, which is just the home World Cup qualifiers and the friendlies and those types of competitions, the competitions that aren't owned by CONCACAF. We can go a little bit more into that later, but the quantity of games for the women, far exceed the quantity of the games for the men, and the audience is very much there.
Right. And is that why we saw both the men's and the women's national team games being included in the MLS TV package over the last 2 deals, I think it was?
Yeah, well, Major League Soccer, as we know, still is in a growth phase, right? They still are trying to become a bigger league and more important. I think when they were selling their media rights and trying to put together a TV package, they knew that they didn't have the audience yet, and they didn't have the content yet to really make themselves as valuable as they wanted to be. But if they could package their TV rights with US Soccer, then they could get a more attractive television deal and more attractive partners, and that was important to them, for very obvious reasons. Now, what does it mean financially? Well, we know from US Soccer's numbers that SUM was paying out a guaranteed rate to US Soccer of $30 million a year, guaranteed. And then everything else above that $30 million that was made from the media deal, from the commercial aspects, was a revenue share. It was split, and so that was a significant outlay for SUM, right? That they were putting kind of a guarantee. They were risking that they were always going to make more than that. Came back to bite them when U.S. men's national team missed the World Cup in 2018. They took a big loss that year, a massive loss in a year that they were expecting massive profits. But that was a good thing for U.S. Soccer, and that's now the risk is flipping a little bit, in that by taking this in-house and moving on their own, they're probably not going to get a guarantee like that, but for the whole property. But they believe that in the long run, it'll be better for them, and that they could, maybe turn more of a profit than they did in the SUM deal.
Right. Just to be clear, the World Cup games were never part of the SUM package, right? Because that's different. That's separate. That's marketed and sold by FIFA.
That's correct. So the World Cup games are marketed and sold by FIFA. So that's not anything that U.S. Soccer has anything to do with. All away qualifiers for World Cup are sold by the home federation, which is why you often see, for example, that Trinidad and Tobago awful game from the 2018 cycle was on beIN Sports, right? Because Trinidad's federation sold it to beIN. It wasn't on ESPN or Fox or one of the U.S. partners. So they're only selling the home qualifiers. That's it, outside of friendlies and other events. So on the women's side, that includes things like She Believes Cup that U.S. Soccer started, or their friendlies, which are seen as much bigger events, right? For the men's side, especially because of the introduction of Nations League, the number of friendlies, the number of important friendlies has actually gone down. And we know, well, we don't know yet, but we assume that for 2026, there won't be any World Cup qualifiers for the men's national team. So the value of the media rights of U.S. Soccer right now is not going to be as high, just because they have as much to sell. But obviously, they're not going to sign a contract that's based, on, or they're not going to make a decision based on just one cycle, right? There are many, many World Cup cycles to come, and they see the growth of their men's national team, the women's national team, the youth national teams, even U.S. Open Cup, something else they own that some would have been in charge of selling, as all properties that have growth potential or are at a high point in their valuations.
Right. Hey guys, there's a new fantasy app that will change the way you watch the Euros this summer. Go to the App Store and download Fan Clash. You pick 4 players from a game, you earn points live as the game happens. You get 4 power-ups and swaps, and top the global ranks to win real cash. I joined the Scotland-Czech Republic game, picked 4 players, and now I gotta think about how to use my power-ups and swaps. To play against me, click on search and look for 11 Yanks. There will be a live leaderboard on the app for my followers. Whoever tops the rank of my followers wins a free month-long premium subscription on FanClash, which doubles cash prize awards. FanClash is giving away $10,000 during the Euros by running cash prizes throughout the tournament's 44 matches. As the tournament progresses, the prize pool will increase. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit, in your opinion, what were some of the benefits of this partnership between the USSF and SUM, and really between USSF and MLS, because SUM was just a marketing arm for MLS? And what were some of the things that you think maybe did not benefit the national teams as much as they should have?
Yeah, I think the benefit from soccer was that it basically became kind of a gatekeeper in a way to the game in this country, right? They were selling the commercial rights for pretty much all of the major soccer entities that exist in the United States. Major League Soccer, U.S. men's and women's national team, and we know SUM also has deals with the MF, so the Mexican Federation in the United States, and CONCACAF. So when it came to events that were occurring in this country commercially, you had to go through MLS, through Soccer United Marketing and the MLS owners. That's a significant amount of power to hold. And we've seen those who don't go through through MLS, they actually feel like it's too much power, right? That's why you see the Relevant battle as the other major organizer in this country that fighting for more space in an arena that's dominated by Soccer United Marketing commercially. I think that was the big advantage. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, just real quick, who was that other partner that you talked about, or the other major player in
Relevant? It's called Relevant Sports. So they're the company that holds ICC games, and that is in an illegal battle. It's in a legal battle right now with U.S. Soccer. Part of that legal battle is it's an antitrust case where they essentially say that this partnership between MLS and U.S. Soccer, between Soccer United Marketing and U.S. Soccer, is conspiring to keep out other organizers like Relevant from staging important games. Their big goal at Relevant, as we've seen the popularity of the ICC decrease, those friendlies that we get every summer, is to hold competitive games in this country. And so we've seen them try to bring La Liga, a regular season La Liga game, to the United States. They were blocked in their attempt to do so by U.S. Soccer, by FIFA, not sanctioning the game. As well as they attempted to bring a game from Ecuador, and that was an attempt to just open the door, right? If they could get an Ecuadorian league game in, it would have a precedent to then bring in a La Liga game as well. That legal battle is still playing out in court, so we'll see what happens there. But I think that was the big advantage for Major League Soccer, is that they sort of are the kind of commercial gatekeepers to the sport. That's obviously no longer with the fact that U.S. Soccer has broken off on its own. They still hold a lot of power, and I think that's something that we should emphasize here. Soccer United Marketing is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They've been valued as, I think, somewhere close to $2 billion or more. We know that because they bought back some of a percentage of the company that they had sold to an investment bank in prior years. They still are the commercial arm of Major League Soccer, which is now in 30 markets, or soon to be 30 markets around the United States, bigger than it's ever been. They still have the commercial rights to Mexican Federation, which we've seen a new ad campaign recently come out that really is going to make a push. And I think we could argue convincingly is the most popular national team in this country. They still work often with CONCACAF, not on every event, but on the big tournaments like the Gold Cup. And so SUM isn't going away. The money from SUM isn't going away for Major League Soccer. A percentage of it is, but not all of it. It's still going to be very, very important in the soccer universe. Flipping the sides a little bit, what were positives and negatives for U.S. Soccer? I think the positives was the $30 million guarantee. They knew they could budget 10 years out. And so they didn't have to worry about something like missing the World Cup drastically changing their budget. And we have to remember that U.S. Soccer is a lot more than just the national team. So when you talk about the youth leagues that are happening all around the country, referee education, coaching education, all these other programs are reliant on that revenue that's driven by the senior national teams especially. But the youth national teams are dependent on that money too. So that guaranteed $30 million was important for kind of budgeting out what the next year was going to look like. On the negative side, I think, you have a middleman essentially to selling your product. So, I'm sure there were times that U.S. Soccer felt like they were second in line in SUM behind Major League Soccer, or maybe even third in line behind Major League Soccer and the FMF, right? You're just another account. Anytime you bring something internal, which is what they're doing now with their commercial operations, you have more control over how much attention you're giving certain types of products. You are having those active conversations with the companies you're doing deals with. And that's kind of what U.S. Soccer is going to move to now. They're going to know exactly how much time and attention is being paid to every single deal, to every single partner. And, there's going to be some overhead for sure. They're going to have to hire out an entire marketing and sales staff, but they see it as being beneficial.
So why do you think USSF now, I know you just said, they see it as being beneficial, but why do you think they chose now to end this partnership?
Well, it had to be now. The TV deal, the media deal is coming up at the end of 2022. So there's never been a more natural time to make a break in this contract. You're going to have to be negotiating your media rights. You're not going to want to wait until the end of the contract to make this decision, and then you're in a rush to try to negotiate a deal that begins in 2023. Once that once that exclusive window is closed, then U.S. Soccer can negotiate with everyone, right? With everyone who's buying up soccer rights. And there are a lot of companies buying up soccer rights right now. CBS, NBC, we're seeing people investing in soccer right now. So this was the time to do it. I would also note that if you look at the C-suite right now of U.S. Soccer, that's changed dramatically over the last year or a couple years. The two people at the top of U.S. Soccer, the CEO and the COO, both have experience working in Soccer United marketing. Both of them, David Wright, who's the COO, Will Wilson, the CEO, they both have worked in the commercial arm of sports. David Wright played a big role in Soccer United marketing, working there for 15 years. He had a hand in what they did for U.S. Soccer. So they have the expertise in-house to do it. They have the people who have done it before. And so I'm sure there's some level of why would we outsource something to Soccer United marketing when we have the expertise right here in-house to do it. And so I think once those hires were made, it made it pretty clear that that was a really good option. Now, maybe some people believed they wouldn't do that because those relationships exist as former employees of some. The assumption I think was, Will Wilson used to work for MLS and SUM. He's definitely just going to keep things the status quo. And instead, they ended a relationship at a company where they used to work. And it's not as though these relationships are completely dissolved in the sense of, not going to be interacting with MLS or SUM anymore, Like they still have business to do with each other. So I imagine it wasn't an easy decision for U.S. Soccer to make to come to this conclusion.
Right. Paul, if you look at the national team, it's gone from being a team that over the past many years has been a pretty decent split between European-based players and MLS-based players. And if you look at the direction it's trending in now, I think the latest Nations League roster only has 4 MLS players on it. Did the fact that the USMNT, if we follow this natural conclusion, we may reach a point where there are almost no MLS players at all on the national team. Did that at all play a role in this decision, or was that not relevant in your opinion?
No, I don't think that was relevant at all because, as you just said, I mean, these roster decisions change from moment to moment, from camp to camp. I mean, I think if we look back at March, there were more than 4 MLS players involved in that camp. I think if Jordan Morris wasn't injured and Paul Arriola wasn't injured, there'd be 6 MLS players instead of 4 on this roster. So I don't think that plays a role at all. There are also 8 players on that team that started their careers in Major League Soccer before going to Europe. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, right? MLS is playing a bigger role in the global transfer market, right? They're playing a bigger role in youth development, right? It might not be that, these players in their prime are still playing in MLS. I think the goal is that those players from a younger age are moving to Europe and playing as we've seen the trends. The development of those players is still going to be significantly in this country. The youth national teams are going to be still made up almost entirely of Major League Soccer players. I think that matters. So no, I don't think it has anything to do with the soccer side of things or the senior national team side of things. It's strictly a business decision.
Yeah, I think some would have had to change their marketing from these are our MLS players on the national team, if there weren't any or very few, to all these guys were developed in MLS. They started their careers here, and it's almost like the college system in NFL where, these college programs take pride in developing players that then go on and play for the NFL.
Right. Well, I mean, you have to remember, SUM is a company that, yes, it's owned by the same owners of Major League Soccer. But when you take on a client like U.S. Soccer, which is what it was, yes, they were business partners, but some, look at the campaigns that we've seen from U.S. Soccer, right? I mean, what are the different ones that they've done? Like One Nation, or whatever the newest one is, States. Like these are some ideas, right? It's not about marketing what we see from MLS marketing. That's done by some too. And yeah, you'll see MLS change its tune about its influence on the national team. But what some would have been doing for U.S. Soccer, I don't think changes that much. You see the marketing campaigns that are run by U.S. Soccer, they have very little to do about where these players are playing their games, right? It's all about the national team. We're all about America, and we're one team, we're one voice. We're Spanish speaking and we're English speaking. We're all the different types of things that U.S. Soccer tries to sell. That's different than what Major League Soccer might try to sell about the national team. And it's easy to conflate the two, right? That's part of the conflict of interest of having the top professional tier of men's soccer essentially sell the governing body that governs it, right? There is this conflict of interest that can confuse fans. But I don't think that the marketing campaigns for the national team were ever going to be about MLS, that U.S. Soccer would have ever wanted national team advertising that was MLS specific or European specific. I think it's just always about what can we put in front of you, our crest, redesigning the crest, signing the sponsorships with Volkswagen that we saw recently, or Budweiser, or whatever else it may be, and then and putting that crest in front of you as much as possible so that you buy tickets to U.S. Soccer games, so that you buy U.S. Soccer gear, and that you think of Christian Pulisic, that you don't think of Chelsea, that you think of U.S. Soccer. That was what SUM was doing for U.S. Soccer.
Gotcha. So you're not, I guess from a fan's perspective, right? You see the USSF board, Don Garber is on it, right? Carlos Bocanegra, general manager of Atlanta United, he's on it. Like you said, Will Wilson and Dave Wright, the CEO and COO were both involved with something. It's hard not to go, is there, and actually this leads into my next question. Are you aware of any instances where, SUM put pressure at all or interfered at all with either venues or rosters for the U.S. men's national team?
Yeah, I don't know that it would be SUM necessarily, but I think certainly there is a conflict of interest or a conflict that occurs in any sport, and whether you're talking about national team or professional level, between the business side of the entity and the sporting side, right? And those clashes exist everywhere. For every team that you've ever supported, there is a clash between the business side and the sporting side. And right. I think, for the U.S. national teams, that clash especially has been over things like venues, because the business side of U.S. Soccer, whether you want to say that's the internal business side, whether the COO or CBO or CEO or SUM, right, is saying, okay, well, if we go play in this stadium, we're going to sell it out. It has X number of seats, and we're going to get more money. Whereas the soccer side might say, well, we want to go to that smaller venue where there are fewer fans of our opposing team, and we don't need to worry about it feeling like an away game. We've seen coaches come out and say, we disagreed with the venue that they picked for this game. We wanted to play somewhere where it would be less of a neutral site or an away feeling and more in a home stadium. But we've also seen very much so that a lot of important games were played in arenas that were not, great for business, right? Playing at Crew Stadium for USA-Mexico games, the most important game, right? The most important game of World Cup qualifying. The most important you have to sell for tickets, for suites, for advertising, for television. Crew Stadium was good for none of that, okay? They had no suites. The TV angles are not great. They had to build a temporary press box that was outdoors on one end for the press to come to. Right. Nothing about that was done for non-sporting reasons, right? It was done for sporting reasons. So, that just goes to show that those conflicts are always going to exist, and they're still going to exist. Just because SUM is no longer the company doing the deal doesn't mean that there's not going to be somebody sitting in the commercial office saying, hey, maybe we should think about playing this game in Orlando or in Red Bull Arena instead of playing this game in Minnesota. And the coach is saying, well, I want to play this game in Minnesota, right? Right. I think that conflict, it's still going to be there, right, no matter what. Right.
Yeah, and that's a really good way to think of it too. It's not like, you're saying that conflicts will exist. It just won't be between SUM and, the sporting side. It will be between the marketing aspect of U.S. soccer and then playing the sporting side.
And I think that was the case before too. The marketing side of U.S. soccer still existed. It was the people who liaised with the outside firm it had hired, right? And that's pre-SUM too. There had to be somebody at US Soccer that was talking to the representatives at IMG when they had the contract. There have to be people at US Soccer that are talking to SUM about what they want, when they want it, to look over the product, to get it approved, to take it to the president, all those things. That staff has existed. Now it's just going to have to be much bigger, right? Now you have to go get the creatives and you have to get a bigger sales team and you have to do all these other things. But, it wasn't just not like 100% of the operations existed at SUM. They outsourced a lot of it, but there were still people there on the business side of US Soccer that were making those decisions. And I think that's always going to be the case. And that's their job, right? Like, you hire them to make business decisions and you hire the coach or the GM to make technical decisions. And I think one major change that's happened at US Soccer since missing the World Cup is that technical staff, that soccer staff that didn't exist before beyond the coach exists now, right? They had Jurgen Klinsmann was the coach and technical director, and they had a youth technical director, Ramos, and that was it, right? And now we know you have Ernie Stewart. You have a whole hierarchy underneath him. You have, Kate Margraf and Brian McBride, and then you have all the national team coaches. And so that didn't exist before. And, I would say, people might not love it. I know people criticize Ernie Stewart all the time, criticize Brian McBride, criticize Greg Berhalter. Maybe not as much criticism that's aimed at the women's side so far. But I think that, those are three former U.S. men's national team players, all three World Cup players for the U.S. men's national team, who are in charge of the soccer side of things. So it's soccer people making soccer decisions. And that's something people asked for a long time. Well, now you have it. And maybe you still won't like the results, and maybe you still don't like the people who are doing it. But they went and got three former U.S. men's national team players and put them in three soccer positions. They put a former U.S. national team player in the U.S. women's national team GM position. And so I don't know what more you want out of those jobs other than certainly accountability, right? Eventually, when it's time for accountability to happen. But we haven't even started the next World Cup qualifying cycle. We're still a couple months away from that for the men. And so we'll see what happens. But I do think that's an interesting dynamic that we'll learn more about, because we don't know any of the home venues yet. And what we have seen is that Greg Berhalter, very much is imposing kind of what he wants on the sporting side. I think this upcoming window is a great example of that. Playing 4 games in this window, taking on the cost of that extra friendly in Switzerland and that extra friendly in Salt Lake City after the Nations League, all of that's done to prepare the team for the same cadence they're going to get the World Cup cycle. So we know that the soccer side is making some decisions about games to be played, where they're being played, the time span in which they're being played. All of those things come at a cost. And I think it's important that we recognize that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing that we see the federation pulling the trigger to make sure that they're staging those at an inflated cost, but in order to prepare the team for World Cup qualifying.
Thank you so much, Paul. I know you got to get going here in just a second, but last question for you. Is Don Garber going to retain his position on USSF board after 2022, now that they no longer have this relationship, or is that not affected?
Yeah, that won't be affected at all. He wasn't on the USSF board as the CEO of SUM. He's on the USSF board as part of the pro committee as the commissioner of Major League Soccer. And unless that changes, he's going to stay on the board. And in fact, his role on the board will change, because prior to this, and we know especially once Carlos Cordero came in, he had to recuse himself from all discussions about the commercial aspects of U.S. soccer when those discussions were had on the board, because he was the CEO of the commercial company with which U.S. soccer was business. He'll no longer have to recuse himself. He'll be sitting in on all of those discussions about what's best for U.S. soccer in the commercial side of things. So Don Garber is not going anywhere. He'll still be there. Carlos Bocanegra will not. He is not going to run again to be a part of the board. His last meeting was this last one, but yeah, Don Garber will very much still be present. And MLS will always have a presence, and a big presence, at U.S. Soccer board meetings.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate you taking the time to come talk to us. You have the Allocation Disorder Podcast with Sam Stagecold that I'm a huge fan of. You also work for The Athletic. Tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your work if they want to know more.
Yeah, you can always find me on Twitter at Paul Tenorio. On The Athletic, I would just encourage you to subscribe to The Athletic. We we have 7 full-time writers. We have a couple full-time editors. It's the biggest full-time staff of soccer writers that's ever been put together by an outlet. And we are, I think we wrote more than 500 MLS stories last year. So, and that doesn't include U.S. men's and women's national team, which, is pretty much going to be my full-time job starting in a couple weeks. Plenty of reasons for you to go read. You get all the other stuff with it, with The Athletic, all of our UK coverage, all of our, NBA, NFL, MLB stuff. But just find me at The Athletic and look forward to hearing from everyone on Twitter as well.
Yep, guys, I can endorse that. I'm a subscriber to Athletic. I'll put the links to both Paul's Twitter and to The Athletic and the Allocation Disorder Podcast in the description, so you guys can check it out. Awesome conversation, Paul. We're looking forward to a fun next couple of weeks with the national team games, Nations League, maybe a final against Mexico on the line. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Good luck, Paul. We hope to have you on the show again soon.